Hi, I'm Maren Leed, the Executive Director of the National Spectrum Consortium, and this is one of our Spotlight series, the events that we do with our members to increase awareness of what they can do and what they bring to the consortium, and to hopefully increase collaboration and innovation amongst our membership. So I'm thrilled to be here today with Dustan Hellwig, the CEO and Chief Technology Officer of Chesapeake Technologies International, or CTI. Dustan, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Maren. Really appreciate you having me, and really appreciate what you do for the NSC and these highlight series. They're very useful. I've watched a number of them, and I'm happy to be a part of one.
Well, great. It's great to have you. So before we dive into substance, can you tell me a little bit about your role and a little bit about your background as CEO and at CTI? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. So, I'm an engineer by trade, a software developer. My first job out of college was working with the EA-6B Prowler, doing electronic warfare mission planning. So 31 years ago, it's been, and pretty much doing the same thing over those years, except now I've progressed into the CTO and the CEO role for the company, which we started back in 2000. We have a very heavy heritage in electronic warfare, but of course, EW doesn't stand alone anymore. And so, we've had to learn how to integrate what we do in electronic warfare with the broader Spectrum community and other Spectrum dependent capabilities that are out there.
Well, so can you just talk a little bit more about that, about how EW has changed and both technically and sort of culturally or organizationally, as there's been a growing recognition of the dependence between cyber, EW, Spectrum, and the evolution of that over the last 3 decades?
Absolutely. We certainly used to just stand alone and unafraid, it seemed. Each community did their own thing. SIGINT stayed in their path. Cyber didn't really exist at the time. What we did in EW bridged across those, but, we didn't really care so much about the disasters that we created in Spectrum, so to speak, and, let the SIG shop clean that up. That's their problem. But I think the early 2000s with counter ID systems and the like certainly showed us that's not possible anymore. We have to live as a coherent unit. And I'm a big fan of the GEMSO CONOP that the Joint EW Center put out a number of years ago with that integration of the 2, the 3, and the 6. I think culturally that's more difficult than just writing it on paper. People have different backgrounds, different focus areas, different knowledge sets. But I am seeing that migration happen over time. And I think organizations like the NSC are in a perfect position to help bridge that divide between these different communities, make us sit down at the table and have discussions with each other, not just operationally within the uniform force, but also as technology companies and solution developers, so that we kind of bake that interoperability in from the beginning.
Well, so you talked a little bit about the joint electromagnetic spectrum operations concept that was developed by the Joint Electronic Warfare Center and embraced by or at least endorsed by the whole department. And it's great to hear that you see a growing coherence among those communities. How do you see the commercial world, which has, sort of it's a language that they don't speak and an environment that they certainly operate in, but think about pretty differently. How do you see that interplay happening, and where is it working best, and where are there still big challenges?
Yeah, sure. Well, the greatest thing I think of the investment that the commercial world is putting is in advanced waveform development. They've learned to work around their own interference with themselves and with each other, probably better than we have in some ways, especially on co-channel resonance and advanced waveforms to minimize that interference. We have to learn to work around and through them. We depend on them. We're certainly starting to use them for communications, even in foreign theaters of operation. And so we want to make sure that they're available and that we don't negatively impact their bottom line. Obviously, if we were to get into a full-scale warfare environment, maybe that's not as important, but we certainly, want to make sure emergency services stay available to the local population and those kinds of things. So we just have to learn to interoperate with it from the beginning, and that means having the tool sets that allow us to plan for that and execute that. And also helping decision makers, maneuver and fires battlefield commanders understand where and when they need spectrum and where and when that they're likely to impact spectrum. And I think that's really the core of the GEMSO ConEmp and ConOp is how to present that invisible battle space picture to a decision maker so that, they can learn to maneuver in and through it just like they do all the other domains.
Well, that fundamental concept of spectrum awareness, of being able to understand and characterize and appreciate the invisible battle space, as you just talked about it, is sort of essential both on the commercial and military sides, and is heavily dependent on being able to sense all of that activity. And increasingly for the military side, there's been an emphasis on the ability to do that passively. Has CTI played a role in that? How are you thinking about that challenge?
Yeah, very much. We have a number of programs. We're not box builders, so to speak, but we'll integrate with anyone and everyone's boxes. All the software that we develop is government open. We deliver every line of source code to the government, and that enables us to be a good partner with the government. And so we say it all the time. We'll integrate with anyone, anywhere, anytime. And I think the real secret to getting that pervasive awareness of spectrum is sampling and looking at spectrum everywhere all the time. Any aperture, any device, any possibility of capturing spectrum relevant information, we should be doing so and storing that in the global cloud environment where we can run the analytics on it to help us understand it better. We do this with imagery, digital globe and overhead surveillance and airborne surveillance. We take pictures of the ground all the time. But we don't do that with spectrum. We go out with these very expensive, highly specialized systems, sample narrow swaths of bandwidth, relatively speaking, and then that information gets carried into a SCIF or disappears from the usable face of the earth for the operators. What we're doing and what we've been doing with our customers is getting lots of devices in the field, thousands, tens of thousands of devices even, that are constantly pushing data back into the global cloud environment. And making that information available for doing pattern life analysis and anomaly detection, and understanding what normal looks like. I don't know how we can maneuver an environment that we really don't even know what normal looks like, much less identify what abnormal looks like.
How much potential do you see in taking advantage of the sensors that are already operating in a given environment, right? Even if they're not military focused or serving that purpose. What's your characterization of the possibility space there?
Well, there's a lot of reality there. Smartphones alone are incredible sensors. They look at specific things most of the times. Without some modification, you can't look at more stuff from them, but still they're collecting a lot of data all the time that's easily available and shareable. Cell towers are deployed everywhere. They're constantly sampling spectrum because that's money to the telecom providers, right? Interference equals loss of funding, loss of quality of service. And so they're very attentive to interference within their environment, and that information should be shareable, or leasable or buyable, or whatever we need to be able to access that pervasive collect. We need to get more ground collection out there, and that can only be done through very low cost sensors. Hundreds of dollars at most, maybe $1,000, and then get them everywhere, in mobile environments, in fixed environments. Obviously, we have to be careful of title authorities, and we have to be careful of what happens to the data, how it's stored, how it's used after it's stored. But I think most of this can all be done and should all be done in the unclassified environment because it's publicly available information, just like social media data and other things that are just out there in the environment.
So I know you place a pretty big emphasis on collaboration and partnering. Can you just say a little bit about how you view that in the context of the NSC, how the NSC helps that or inhibits that, or could do better in that regard? I mean, what's your sense of the role that the NSC has to play in this important space, essential for the military, but sort of equally essential for economic growth?
Sure. Well, you guys are in a great position to be that bridge. I say you guys, we're a member, so I guess it's us guys too. Be that bridge, be the conversation starter at a minimum between technology companies that are working in both the commercial and the defense space. I've said this before, there's only one spectrum. So, we all have to operate in it. We all have to understand it. We all have to, make do, just like with I always draw comparisons to the physical space because it's something people understand. Even though we have barbed wire around some of our military bases and the military controls that airspace or that ground space, commercial entities enter it and leave it all the time to deliver packages, to deliver food, to, and likewise, the military sometimes progresses and transgresses through commercial space. We drive our vehicles through cities. We operate in, environments where commercial is more prevalent. So we have to learn to live together, and the NSC is in a perfect position to help us do that. Spectrum, whether it's intentional interference, i.e. electronic warfare, or unintentional interference, i.e. spectrum management, or delivery of capability through and on spectrum, i.e. cyber or communications or whatever. It's a lot of the same math. It's a lot of the same technology. It's a lot of the same devices. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to collaborate more on that as a community and come up with coherent solutions that answer the mail for all the different focus areas.
Well, we need to probably wrap this up as it looks like you have places you need to drive off to. So
I'm in my mobile command center.
Taking the time to talk with us today and to participate in this. And if anybody out there has questions, either for the National Spectrum Consortium, please feel free to contact me, or for CTI, please get in touch with Dustan. Dustan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks. Really appreciate the time and had a good time. Thank you.
Thanks.